books that belong to him that I'd like his friends to have. So please look through the books and take any away that you'd like to have. And please eat food. I can't eat it. There's too much. So just thank you. If anybody wants to say anything, you can say something. But there's a book outside. You can sign and you can write comments if you want.
Why don't you say 15, 20 minutes, whatever, you have people, or whatever. I mean, might take a little organizing just to start.
Yeah, I would love to hear stories about Mr. Willie, because I didn't meet him until 5 or 6 years ago, so.
Does
No
anybody want to say
shortage.
anything?
Well, since I opened my mouth, I have a great memory of going with Willy and someone we were working with who was from Minnesota. We rented a small plane, flew out of the New Orleans airport. This was in 1999. And we flew down to the mouth of the river to see it, because you really have to see it from the air.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. And Willie was pointing out things as we went along. Oh, well, there's this plant here, and this is this. And I said, Willie, you can't see any of this. He was already legally, but he knew where everything was down the river, just like he knew every street in New Orleans. He would guide us around New Orleans. It was in his head, you know. So that's my memory.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got one. Willie and Florence Robinson and I were driving from Baton Rouge to St. Louis for a Mississippi River Basin Alliance meeting. And Florence and I in the front seat talking away on I-12, and all of a sudden we hear this voice from the back, Willie saying, I think you're all missing the exit on I-95. And we figured right then it was going to be a magical tour if the legally blind guy was giving us directions. And it was amazing up to St. Louis, and then stopping in Memphis on the way back to visit Mud Island with the map of Mississippi. Amazing, wonderful. I learned so much from Willie about Louisiana and the environment and how we work to protect people in Louisiana from all this stuff. So, and I love his saying, he took yucky photographs.
Some of them are in there.
Yeah, some of them are already here, yes.
That's not one of them.
I have one. Years ago, when we had some tour, we live in the same neighborhood as Willie and Mary. We had a home tour of homes in the Garden District. And in one particular, and Mary and Willie, Mike and I were going to be docents or helping out. In one particular large home, one particular room that was going to be on tour, the owner was worried about some articles, maybe some statues, some artwork in that room. She didn't want it to walk off. And Willie said, I'll stay here and watch it. Mary says, Willie, you're blind. And Willie says, nobody knows that.
I'll say something. I'm his nephew, Clay Bear, and all I can say about Willie and Mary is I'd go to their house for Thanksgiving, and he was always kind to me, and he always make some funny face, or he'd make a clunking noise with his tongue, and he'd just make me smile, and he always made me feel welcome, and I'm gonna miss him. And here's to Willie.
Yeah.
I have one that I'd like to add. Most of you love Willie because of his Louisiana home presence. His roots were so deep here. But he also led national and international movements for other communities to own their deep roots and protect the natural around them. He and I first met when I was a toxicologist with the National Wildlife Federation, and he was the head of the Louisiana Wildlife Federation. And that was kind of a marriage of advocates made in heaven, because he shared all of his knowledge and taught people to care. And I can remember distinctly bringing a brand new director of the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, the first African-American director, to tour Louisiana between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. And Willy was the most expert tour guide, probing the new director for where his heart and his powerful mind was going to be on the themes of environmental justice. And he did good for the whole of America for that influence, and we should all be sad at his passing, but proud of all the goodness that he did on our collective behalf.
I'll say something real quick, Mary. I'm married to Willy's baby brother, and when we met, we all loved to go camping. It was a big thing, and so we often went towards Mississippi and into Arkansas, but we always stopped to visit at Willy and Mary's. And he's like, I see you have your canoe. Where are y'all going? Oh, we're gonna go over to Buffalo Creek. Well, what end? It's like, we're gonna put in at Wooden. No, you wanna go north of there because there's a plant about 3 miles. And they're extruding into the river. You don't wanna go downriver from there. Oh, okay. And so the next time we come, we tell them where we're going. Oh, no, God, no. Don't go there. And that went on. It's finally like, we're going camping. Let's don't stop. So we never knew where to go. Willy had a story about every waterway in Louisiana and Mississippi and into Arkansas, where to go, what to stay away from, and what to look for. And he was just an amazing person, kind, smart, patient, knowledgeable, and a fighter. A fighter. It was an honor to know him.
I think I need to say, pardon me, I'm Winston Riddick. I used to be Willy's supervisor at the Attorney General's office. And I put it in quotes because you know Willy. When I'm here representing the Riddicks and Attorney General William Gus, who was a great friend of Willy's over the 16 years he worked there. Steve Irving back in the back there was one of my old law partners. He was instrumental with Willy doing all the stuff in the AG's office. And Willy, if you read his biography in the obituary in the paper, was the only guy that's ever been hired to create government action by citizens in Louisiana or anywhere else. So he was, to say the least, not the least controversial employee that we had out of the 250. He was probably the most controversial, because if you worked with him, which I think almost everybody here in some way or other knew him as a friend or worked with him, he was constantly creating things that went to the legislature and to the courts, which were significant for the environmental movement, that nobody paid much attention to till Attorney General Gus got elected. And what everybody didn't know is, though he was a New Orleanians elite, he was still a good old country boy, because he liked to hunt, fish, and that's how he got interested in the environment. And when he met Willy, it was kind of a match made in heaven, because he couldn't get out and say some of the things that Willy could. And so when Willy got in trouble, one of my jobs was to make sure that I helped tamp it down a little bit, which wasn't always possible, as you know. But what Billy Gus liked most about him was, not only was he a good husband, a good family man. Billy Gus had 10 kids, by the way. So that was very important to him, but Willy was a devoted public servant, of which you don't always find devoted public servants that have such a dramatic impact on the future of Louisiana and on Louisiana politics. And Willy was right there on the front pointing edge, doing it every day. Now, did he cause some problems? Absolutely. You can't do change in Louisiana without creating problems, can you? And is he missed? Ask yourself, yes. Who's there replacing it? There was no way to replace Willy, was there? Because he was an original. I first met him in Opelousas when we were at USL together. I don't remember what it's called now, but I think it was SLI in those days. He grew up in a family, uniquely Southern French, and they still lived in an old colonial house that his great-great-grandfather had built, if you know it. And I see a few heads nodding. Beautiful old house, beautiful family, and you knew he came from people that cared. If you sat and had a glass of wine or a drink with him or whatever, and watched the interaction of his family, he came from a good family. He had a great family, but he was a great public servant. And we are kind of in short supply, I guess, in Louisiana, maybe, with the Willy Fontenots of the world that we need. But the truth of the matter is, he made an impact, not just on the environment, but on the people that worked with him because of his dedication. So I will miss Willy, and I think most of y'all will, but he was a friend, a fine human being, and a great proponent of change. And he did it without being confrontational, which was difficult to see, but if you worked with him, he never raised his voice, he never threatened anybody, he never let anybody intimidate him. And when you're as controversial as Willy was out in the small towns of Louisiana, challenging the established elites who were supporting, quote, the industry that had brought jobs, it was easy for him to have been a very different person. So Mary, Donna, we'll all miss him, and we're all proud that we knew him. Thank you.
I met in the mid-1970s, and I can say categorically that nobody was more important to the environmental movement in Louisiana than Willy Fontenot. And he was important to me also because at that time I was doing investigative reporting, and Willy changed the trajectory of my career. He convinced me that the most important thing to write about in Louisiana was the environment. And it was hard to argue with him because our air pollution was horrible, the cancer rates were high, people were suffering from respiratory problems, especially children. There were hazardous waste sites, unregulated hazardous waste sites all across the state. And those sites were leaking into the groundwater, into people's wells. And when I would go out with Willy to those sites, I was appalled at the smell a mile away from those sites that people had to live with. But if there's one thing that Willy cared about as much as the environment, it was people. And he cared about those people. And he showed those people how to gather into groups, first just small groups at each site, and then band those groups together, and they got power from doing that. And he showed them how to navigate the system in Louisiana, to find out information, the information that they needed to make change. He showed them how to put pressure on polluters, and boy, did he put pressure on polluters. And Willy had lots of people who loved him. He also had lots of people who hated him. And sometimes I think that we can be measured by the people who love us and by the people who hate us if we're doing anything. And Willy did so much. But he showed these groups how to force the legislature to come up with stronger laws. And in so many ways, Willy was just integral to the environmental movement. And if he were with us today, he would tell us that protecting the environment isn't something that you just do one day and drop. You've got to keep doing it, keep doing it. I don't know what our environment would be like today if it weren't for Willy Fontenot, but it would be a nightmare, I know. And hopefully You know, unfortunately, Willy's not with us in body anymore, but hopefully his spirit will encourage all of us to continue what he did and to continue to fight for the environment, particularly now when it's under siege again. Thank you.
I knew William very well. I was his older brother. And William accomplished a lot. He did all sorts of things, and has been itemized. He could be abrasive. He could put a lot of concerted, long-term effort into the environment. But there's one thing that people have not said much about today. William was a very happy fellow. He was always smiling. He had a great smile. When he talked to somebody, he did so. He offered his hand, a big smile. He tried not to be offensive. And I think that helped him accomplish as much as he did. Now, people have said, how can you gauge how offensive somebody is? When William was a teenager in high school, he was friendly, he had a lot of friends, but they could see how well-mannered, how happy he was, and they had a nickname for him. The nickname was Willy Field of Mice. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with the field of mice. Well, they're not like tigers or lions. But he did all of that he did with a smile, a happy face, and he was very good to the people around him. As somebody's already said, his family, his friends, and everybody will be deeply miss him. Thank y'all all for coming.
Very bazillion Willy stories. We met back in, I think, the early 90s, but I think that he was a wonderful teacher. In fact, I think of him as the Mr. Rogers of the environment. And he always had time for students. I don't care what he had on the agenda. If you had a couple of students together, he was gonna drop everything and come and talk with them. And I have a story too. He was always, telling you about places, and you wonder if I would drive, he'd say, turn there, turn here. And I wonder myself, how did he know? How could he possibly know? But one of the last things that we did was that he took me to different grave sites that now exist on chemical company property that are no longer easily accessible to the general community. And I just think over the years that I never heard him get angry or express the rage that I know he had. And I always wanted to be like that. I wanted to be nice.
Still times that.
My memories are back in when you lived in New Orleans and went canoeing. And some of those bayous west of New Orleans, Bayou Trepanier, that we paddled, that may have been his beginning of awareness, because that was Exxon, now it starts with an M, some other big refinery dumping into Trepanier for decades. And then Tulane got involved in measuring it and so on. So I don't know if you remember the canoe trips, the Sierra Club trips and so on, that maybe Darryl was on and Doug and so on. So that's he's always exceptionally cheerful and genial, and just exceptional.
We have a photo that he took of Bayou Trepanier with, I'm saying that wrong.
With a T,
Yeah.
Trepanier.
Trepanier with all the toxins underneath. And it's beautiful flowers, but he'd always say, completely toxic underneath.
Yeah, yeah, it was a big deal at the time.
Yeah.
It's sort of been reduced.
Thank you, that was wonderful.
I will share the story. Okay.
Get to the camera.
Of course, I knew Willie like forever. I think I probably met him maybe when Billy Gus was running for Attorney General in 1972. I know I met Billy Gus, and I think Willie had something to do with it. So we already knew each other, and long about at some point in time, he comes to me and he says, "There's this lady named Mary McCassell, and we'd like you to help her." So I go out to meet with Mary McCassell, and we have a meeting out there. It wasn't hard to figure out what the problem was, because the problem was going on when I got out there. And the scientific description of what they're doing, they were doing this thing called land farming. This ain't good kind of farming, you know. This is putting hydrocarbons in the ground, letting them rot, and mixing them with kiln dust so that you get the benefit of all of the above. It was, somebody said, bad enough to gag a maggot. Well, it was. So anyway, this is going on when I come out there and meet with them. So we discussed we're going to file a class action suit. The object is to shut them down by making them pay the cost of what we're going to do. So all right, we go file that. That became McCassell versus Rollins, which went on for many more years, but became the class action suit. Well, the next person that Willie comes to me, there's this lady named Teresa Robert. And so he introduces me to what became the Save Ourselves case that stopped IT, the IT plant in Ascension Parish. And that went on for a long, long time, and we did that. And then there were some other ones that weren't quite as well known, but up near Rollins, if you think what was going on in the Allison community from Rollins was bad, it was bigger, but there was another site just north of it. I think it was called Petro Processors. And Willie introduces me to the Petro Processors thing, and what are we going to do to solve this? Which it had one of those cemeteries up there too, where Mary McCassell's like mother or grandmother, I think, was buried. But it was as bad or worse than Rollins, and it caught on fire. And we literally got out there right after the thing was on fire with some of the stuff still smoking. Probably was a really dumb thing to do. And that became the affidavit that became the EPA case to shut Petro Processors down. So Willie was always getting me into stuff like that. And it usually involves something that smelled really bad and probably wasn't good for you. So anyway, I enjoyed meeting Willie. I enjoyed working with Willie. I couldn't believe that Willie was getting away with the things that he was doing, working in government. Somebody had to be covering for him. So anyway, that's my story of Willie. There's probably a bunch more, but that's the ones I remember the most.
I'm Donna, I'm his daughter, and I said that I would read something for someone who isn't here today, but I also wanted to talk a little about my experience with him as a father. And as other people have mentioned, one really remarkable thing about him was that he would come home, you know, he was dealing with all of this all the time. He would come home. In my entire life, I don't remember him ever once saying a negative thing about, like, ever complaining about what he did. I don't remember him ever, like, being in a bad mood and, you know, being angry or anything like that. And so he would just come home and he would meet us where we were as kids. He would be silly. He had no idea, like, he didn't have the sense of, I have to project that I'm this big, strong grown-up. He would be a silly, you know, he would take us trick-or-treating dressed as a bunny. He would do, you know, he was just always on our kid level. And so it kind of set this impression for me of like, that if you want to make changes in the world, you just go do them. You know, you don't have to get overwhelmed looking at all the problems. You just focus on what you can do, and also kind of like that you can be this powerhouse, but be unassuming, and you can just, you know, you don't have to be focused on the image that you're maintaining. You can just be this really ordinary seeming people can be these really powerful beings that make a difference in the world. And what I wanted to read, so this is from Oliver Houck. So he wanted me to read, so I think Willy was one of the most courageous people I've ever known. He took a lot of heat for what he was doing, and he only had the Attorney General to support him. There is not an organization that knew him who didn't love him for what he was doing for them. Kind of a doctor handing out advice for how to heal. And his humor, wow. I remember him dressing up in a green bunny suit for Easter and handing out carrots. And there was no one in the environmental community with a better understanding of the history, details, and foibles of Louisiana politicians. The environmental groups are more sophisticated now, and there are more groups to help them, but there will never be another Willy Fontenot. Lisa and I will dearly miss him.
I'm Russell Honoré, a friend of Willy Fontenot. I got a chance to meet him in 2012 on my introduction to the environmental movement. I moved back to Baton Rouge, minding my own business, and I got a call from Bayou Corn, and went down there and got involved with Willy, Wilma, Subra, Mary Lee Orr, and Darrell, Wiley, and others in the environmental movement. And soon after that, we created the Green Army. And I met Willy Fontenot as we approached the legislature. And it was an honor to go with him to the legislature and stare down the undemocratic process that happens at the Capitol. And he was always forthright, and he gave me the greatest quote I think everybody in Louisiana needs to understand, that a permit is a permit to pollute. If you get a permit to put a generator next to your house and make sure it's in the right place, but a permit is a permit to pollute our air, our water, and our land. It allows the companies to put so much poison into the air at a given time, over time, and it allows them to dump their waste in the Mississippi River and in our bayous. That's a permit is. So it's a permit to actually violate Mother Nature and our earth. I learned that from Willy Fontenot, and it's a quote I've used across the country. And people back up in their chairs, even lawyers, because they don't teach that in law school. That a permit is a permit to pollute. And what Willy Fontenot did, in my observation of him, was to hold them accountable. You got your chemicals, keep it in the pipe. Don't put it in our land, don't put it in our water, and do what your mama taught you. If you mess it up, you clean it up. And you respect the neighbors. And he also taught me there was a big word running around as I got involved with the movement, environmental justice. He said, General, remember, that's not a law. And too many people started looking at it as a religion. You got the Clean Water Act, you got the Clean Drinking Water Act, that's your Water Act, and you got the Clean Air Act. That's what you go to court with. Everything else is drama. Make you feel good that you're in the environmental justice movement, but unless you're enforcing the law, it don't matter, because that law has been written, and it's constantly being challenged, from the Chevron Act to the Sackett Act that's going to take away our wetlands. I'm preaching because there's no other time. I see a lot of retirees here. We need you in the legislature. We need people who are free from worry about my boss finding out that I'm talking about clean water in my parish. We need the blue hairs there. The most powerful
Hey, I'll say a little bit. Pat Ryan from Baton, Louisiana. Back in the day, Willie and I were partners in crime. And back when a lot of these younger pictures on that screen were around. But anyway, back in the day, I was director of the Louisiana State Planning Office under the first Governor Edwards and also at the end of Kithel. But Willie was always a partner in crime and a friend and a supporter, whether we were trying to work out the preservation of the Chaffalot Basin, the Louisiana National Scenic River System, or starting the Coastal Zone Management Program with Dr. Paul Tomplay, or a lot of y'all know. But Willie was always there and a fighter, and you could depend on Willie. And so I wanted to come out, honor Willie, and also see how many of us are still above ground.
I was going to say something early, but I didn't want to interrupt him. But he was a great brother. Growing up, he was so much fun, and I used to go with him all over with he and his friend. They let me in, so it was nice. But he was just a wonderful person, you know. And later on, when I lived in Mandeville, and I met people around there, and if they found that I was his sister, they would tell me how wonderful he was. And I said, you know, he could almost start a new religion with all these Americans. But because they just thought he was great.
Thank you.
Say 2 words about his driving. Say 2 words about his driving.
That was not good.
So my name is David Brown, and I was a friend of Willie Fontenot's. He was certainly a partner in crime, and he was also a mentor. I mean, this room is full of so many luminaries in the environmental movement and people whom I hold in the highest esteem. The collective integrity of this room is very high, and it is an honor to Willie in his life. Donna, when you were talking about how he never, he didn't come home and ever have a complaint, I wish I could say the same. I try and live up to Willie's examples every way that I can, but I can't say that, and that's certainly true of him. There's just so many memories that flood in about the time that I spent with Willie and the things that I learned about Louisiana and about environmentalism and about nature. There's a picture of him, being the artist that he was, looking through all of his photos and just learning through Willy's eyes and his experience. I was essentially, and I'm an attorney. I'm still a practicing attorney, but I was also Willy's driver a lot of times when he was going to anything that required him to get on the road and drive to New Orleans and have a meeting or be somewhere. And it enabled me to access these interesting dinners and lunches and meetings with people that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to attend. And when it was time to introduce myself, I'm just saying I'm Willy's driver, but he was also my mentor and introduced me to a lot of you. And I practiced plaintiff side environmental law, and he introduced me to several clients. I also did an oral history for Willy that's at the T. Harry Williams library at LSU, that if anybody's ever interested in learning some of these things that people have mentioned stories about, parts of, all of that's collected there, or much of it. And so I was able to collect a lot of what was in Willy's steel trap of a brain about the environmental movement over the years. One of the things that sticks out in my mind, and I'm not going to get it entirely right, was a pin that Willy wore that said something like, "If you ever thought one person can't make a difference, you've never spent the night in a tent with a mosquito." And that makes me laugh when I'm otherwise sad about the loss of Willy Fontenot. And just things like that, his mentorship. And I remember one time we pulled up to his house in the Garden District here in Baton Rouge, and I left the car running while we were talking. He's like, "Please turn the car off." And I was like, "No, I'm just only going to be here a minute." And then he just quietly, Willy said, "Could you turn the car off?" Yeah, I can. It was the little things of like Willy's making sure that you're being an environmentalist in every way that you can be, even the small details. But I loved him very much and missed him, and thank you for sharing him with me so much time that I got to borrow him from your lovely family. Thank you, and thank all of you.
Thank you all very much. If nobody has anything else, please. Oh, there's somebody else?
I wanted to say thank you. I was learning to know someone who's died of cancer or some other consequence of being poisoned.